my creative friends, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Prompt. This is Fast Fridays, where we dig into the Fast Screenplay system, or I talk about some aspect of it or insight about it to help you, whether you join us or not, to help you have a clearer picture of both how the process works, maybe dig into some of the ideas or insights that the system itself can provide you with. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about today was this idea of the logline. The logline being something I get asked about all the time. I've got a great video on this channel called How to Grab Producer's Attention in 15 Seconds or something like that. One of the more popular episodes on this particular channel, which goes into how to create a logline, what it's for, why it exists. I'll pop a link somewhere on this video to show you that, so you can dig a little bit deeper into that one. But one of the things I want to talk about is specifically about how to use a logline and the challenge of the loglines. One of the things we do in Fast Screenplay, as I was reverse engineering the process of taking writers literally from the start of an idea all the way through the process, literally all the way to the deal, was I realized that loglines are incredibly important to the process. But as I was actually breaking it down and reverse engineering the process, I realized that there are actually two different loglines, two different places where you create or where you can create a logline, and they actually serve quite different functions. So the logline that everyone typically thinks about is the logline that is used to try to attract attention. So it's that 25 words or less pitch, more or less, where you're going to try to hook a producer, a production company, agent, manager, whomever. It's that blurb that usually used to end up in the TV guide. It's that little one sentence that gives you an essence of what the story is all about. Now, most writers think of logline as being simply that. And as I was breaking down this process and trying to help writers through this process, what I realized along the way is that if you actually split it into two different concepts, it will strengthen your ability to both develop loglines and to actually use them more effectively at the time in the process that you actually need to use them. So what do I mean by that? So in Fast Screenplay, at the very end, the final phase of the system, the seventh phase, the payoff phase, which is where you now have a screenplay, you have tested that screenplay, you've seen how it lands with readers, you've taken their notes and feedback and adapted and aligned so that you understand, so that your project lands with the reader the way you want it to land with the reader. You have that, you're ready to go. It's now time to find and connect with your project's ideal producer. At that point is when you develop a logline, and the logline at that point is specifically used to try to grab the attention of the producer. It's designed to hook the producer. This is what I'm talking about in that other video that I referenced earlier. The other idea in that video is kind of what the payoff phase is all about. We go into great detail about how to build what I call the promise progression. So in order to actually hook a producer or a production company, agent, manager, whomever, in order to actually hook them into your project, you need to, first of all, grab their attention. Because if you can't grab their attention with your story idea, they don't have time. They're not going to be interested. They're going to move on. But once you do hook them, if you create a logline that grabs their attention, you're going to want to make sure that the next item that you give them, whether it's send me a synopsis on that project. That's what we used to do was send me a one-page synopsis. That's all I really have time for. That's all I really want to see. What is the story that you've actually created from that logline you've just pitched me? Now, if your synopsis isn't extraordinary, doesn't take the basic idea that I got excited about within the logline from, if it doesn't take that idea further and make me even more excited about reading your screenplay, then it's probably going to fizzle and die on the vine, which is what happened the vast majority of the time that we would get logline submissions in through Embryo Films. Now, if at that point your synopsis can get me more excited and make me want to see what your project is, then that's when we request the screenplay. And then if the screenplay can go even further than what my imagination took me, if if it can truly resonate with the producer, and again, you've aligned your project at this point, so you know that you're only reaching out to the people with whom it's perfectly aligned, and you know that they're right for it in this moment, that's when you're going to make the deal. That's when the deal is going to happen. So creating a logline is really a part of this promise progression. So many writers take the logline completely out of context. All it is about that 25 words or less, and they get very frustrated and they try to cram their entire story into this one little logline, and ultimately it's working against you because it's not a strong logline, it's not a strong hook, it's not going to pull us into your project. It's also not going to give you anywhere to go. If the best thing about your pitch is your logline, then your story and everything else is kind of only living up to that promise, then you haven't really created a project that's going to exceed audience expectation. So when you're thinking about putting together this logline, if you're putting together that logline, it really is inseparable from the marketing plan that you have for your project. The logline doesn't exist in isolation. It's not about just throwing a logline out there and seeing who likes it. Hey, somebody likes it? Cool, I can send them my script. It's really about understanding that dynamic of engaging your audience and pulling them into your project. Now, understanding this actually helps us see what the other kind of logline is. Now, the other kind of logline I refer to as the one simple sentence. Now, a lot of writers like to basically take if you think of your logline as something that makes a promise for the audience, and that the story itself, we want to make sure that it exceeds the expectations built into that promise. If you don't know what I'm talking about, read my missing ingredient free report. But if you think of your logline as being that kind of that everything has to come out of that, or at least answer that in some way, then you can also think of the logline as sort of a framing sentence for the development of your project. And that's when I realized that there are actually two different kinds of loglines. If you use the marketing hook logline to be the framing document that you're going to create your story out of, then you're actually potentially missing the mark. What we can do instead is have a specific, what I call one single sentence, but you can call it a logline if you want to have a logline that basically acts as the spine that you're going to be creating your story to. So in other words, when you're starting out on the development of your project, create for yourself, once you've sort of been through the initial working out your idea, once you've figured out what that is, condense it into a single sentence that sentence will serve as your kind of your grounding for the project itself, so that when you make the story choices, when you figure out what the character plot's going to be, or who the characters are going to be, or whether to include or not include this scene or that scene, if you have a strong single sentence logline, story development logline, then ultimately you're going to be able to make choices that either feed into that or don't. And so as you start to go astray and you come up with 10 different scenes and subplots and all this, because your active imagination, ideas spark ideas, you go off in a million directions. As you go off in these million directions, how do you know which ideas to keep, which ideas to get rid of, which characters to keep, which characters to get rid of? Well, you know based upon how well they serve that single sentence, that story development logline. Now, the reason you don't want that logline to be the basis of your marketing approach is because that logline is there to ensure that your story development stays on track and on target. Make sure that you stay focused as you go through the story development process. That's not going to serve you when it's time to go out and try to hook and connect with and grab the producer's attention. So the bottom line here is, if you're developing your project right now, if you're in the story development stage, try to come up with a single sentence or a logline, however you want to call it. Try to think of something that will encapsulate what your story is and what your story is about. Let that help you through the story development process. Then later, once you have a script, once you know how it lands with the producer, once you understand what they're getting out of it and who it's most likely to connect with and how you want to connect with that person, that's when you create a new logline based upon the project that you actually have. So in other words, the first logline is for a project you're about to create. The second logline is for a project that you have created that you're about to try to sell. If you can separate those two ideas, you're going to come up with better quality loglines. It's going to help you develop your story faster, and it's actually going to help you find and connect with your project's ideal producer even better than you ever thought possible before. So if you want more information about this, you want to understand how this works and how it actually factors into the creative process itself, join us in FAST Screenplay, the 10-day free start. You can check out how it works. That's just the very beginning of the process. We get into the story development logline in the early stages of the focus phase, where we organically turn your ideas and your passions into the most compelling story you've ever written. So anyway, that's enough out of me for today. Hopefully this idea makes sense. Try to filter it through your own imagination, apply it in your own unique way. Don't forget to take some action today, whether it's 10 minutes or 1 hour or 10 hours if you can afford it, whatever. Just take some action today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow.